Welcome to the In My Opinion Show with Ronald, Barrington, Robinson, and friends, seen on the internet 24 hours, 7 days a week. I want to welcome our millions of viewers worldwide, and I especially want to welcome our co-host. We have Mr. Glenn Cotton, attorney Glenn Cotton. We have Mr. Henry Hatter.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
You're more than welcome. First, I'd like to talk about Flint, Michigan, the death of longtime businessman Don Williamson and mayor. A tragic loss. Prayers go out to the entire family. Rest in peace, my friend. Henry, you had mentioned that you wanted to say something about Mr. Williamson.
Yeah, I knew Don Williams very well. He was a tough guy. The first person I can think he's most like is President Donald Trump. He was difficult to work with, but he delivered services well to the people in the city of Flint. And many people who are residents here will remember Don Williams because of all of the services that he delivered to people who lived on the north and west side of Flint, and the south side of Flint, and everywhere. And without reservation. I will remember Don Williams closely because he donated to the Republican Party when I was finance chairman. And I had asked him if I could use his facility, the Patsy Lou Williams facility, to host this function. He not only let me do that, but he gave me $1,000 to put into the coffers. So I remember Don Williams as contributing this thing for the goodwill of the people of Flint.
Thank you. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Mueller report. A two-year investigation of laws that have been broken has been completed. Dozens of Trump's friends and business associates have pleaded guilty in federal court. Some have already gone to prison. Others are awaiting sentencing. What do you think the Mueller report is going to show? Glenn, what do you think?
Well, Ron, I think it's going to show a couple things. It's going to show, number one, that some unscrupulous activity occurred out of the White House, and number two, that it's up for the people to decide what the consequences should be with respect to President Trump. I do think that once the full report gets disclosed, then Congress does have a right to see the full report. I do believe that it may be politically embarrassing, perhaps, to the White House, but I think the American people are going to know and find out what is contained, and people should decide what exactly should be the results of that report.
I don't always agree with an attorney. They have the ruination of the world, according to many political jokes. And Glenn, I hope you take that with a touch of grace. But I agree with you. I think once that report is disclosed to the American people will decide what the next course of action should be. And there may be some things that are embarrassing in there, but the president is on the right track in this country. He's doing all the things that people want him to do. We have been following the rank and file way of doing things for a long time. He comes up with a different agenda and drives a different agenda to save us from ourselves and from the outside world, shutting off the borders, allowing us to be a country with borders, so that people just don't come in without being invited in. And we have nothing against immigration, but we do have a problem with people coming in without requesting entry. I have a problem with that. But I have nothing against the people who want to come in, but there's a way to do it. And I think the Mueller report hopefully will show that there was no intent in convoluting this process with immigration, because that's going to be a large part of it. And there were some people that were really creeps in the White House. No disrespect to the president, but Jerry Kushner and some of the others were problematic in the beginning, and Manafort and some of the others. We knew that. The president was advised against it, but he knew what his vision was more than I do. and more than many of us does. And he is going by his own perception of where he wants to take the country. He says America first. If he says America first, I'm with him.
Well, I have no problem with America first, okay? But you mentioned something, you know what I mean, about the creeps in the White House. In my opinion, Trump is the biggest creep, not only in the United States but all around the world. Look at how many countries he's talked against, okay? And that's not presidential, all right? And as far as these people, on the border, coming across the border, these people are getting away from gang violence and disease and no food. They looking for a better life. America is a melting pot, okay? America has been accepting people for last 200-300 years, all right? Trump's parents were you want to call them refugees, but whatever you might want to call them, his folks come over here. They didn't have papers, and millions of other people, okay, from the Chinese to the Germans to a host of other nationalities. America is the land of hope, and I'm thinking that there's millions of folks out there that would agree with me, about this. All right, these people that you see at the border, they're doctors, they're nurses, they're lawyers. All right, engineers. Those are the people that we want to come in. But they don't talk about that, all right?
But the ones that we see there at the borders are people, indigenous people come in with lots of babies, some are not theirs, and they've been thrust onto American soil through a surreptitious way of bringing them in. And nobody would want to hurt a child.
We got to look at this from a historical point of view. If we look at it from all of the immigrants that came about, and Ron mentioned, Trump's grandparents and things of that nature that came into the country illegally. They came over by boat, didn't have any papers, things of that nature. These are these people today. So if we put it into context, just like Ron was trying to do, these aren't the only people that have come into the country that didn't have the paperwork, who didn't wait in line, that weren't invited by somebody to come here. They're coming to this, just as in the Statue of Liberty says, this is the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is a land of opportunity. We shouldn't be restricting folks in. We should be welcoming folks in. And with respect to saying that we need to close our borders, we have the longest, poorest border to our north that no one seems to be paying attention to whatsoever. I can tell you, years back, I rode a canoe through Canada back and forth. No Canadian people, no Americans were there to see me. I took the Lewis and Clark expedition route and nobody saw me. But again, if I was a terrorist and I had evil thoughts and whatnot, I wouldn't try to come through the southern border. I'd come through Canada. And Canada, again, has the most porous open border with the United States on the face of the planet. But we want to focus and create hype with respect to what is occurring on the southern border, but that is not a problem. The problem is with people and their attitudes towards others, because we don't like people who are not like ourselves. If we can't understand them, if we can't relate to them, then automatically we say something's wrong with them. And I think that is one of our problems that we have as Americans in our modern context, is that for the most of the part, we only speak English, and we don't understand Spanish, we don't understand Arabic, we don't understand the languages that are spoken around the world, so we feel threatened because of these people who want to come into our country because we don't understand them. And I think what we have to do is take a step back, look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what if this was us? What if this was us trying to come into the country where we wanted opportunities? How would we want to be treated? And I was always taught as a little boy that you treat others as you want to be treated yourself. So I want other people to treat me with respect, so I'm going to treat others with respect also.
Glenn, I think that is a mainstream American vision. And I don't think that any American would disagree with you.
I don't think they would disagree with me either.
Democrats or Republican, I don't, a man or woman, black or white, I don't think they would disagree with you. But the problem is the narratives that's driven this to separation between blacks and whites and Indians and everybody else from gender-oriented circumstances and stuff like that, that has grown out of this discussion which corrupts clarity and what we're trying to achieve. First of all, we need immigrants like we need fresh air.
Well, let me ask you this. Who's going to pick your fruit?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So we need immigrants. We need a lot of different folks, and that's exactly what my point is that knowledge is the key to understanding. If you don't have knowledge, then you won't have an understanding.
But if you convolute it by throwing all of the kids to the border, and people have a real feel for people who perform injustices toward kids, and that's what it appears, which is not the intended consequences of any actions that Americans would take.
What if I told you that my understanding of the children that are being promulgated or propped up at the border are being propped up there by the United States government and not these foreign people? My understanding is the corralling that's being done is being done by the administration officials. Well, you may laugh at that, okay, but
Well,
my understanding is adults are the ones who are telling the children what to do.
Okay, but you know, there's something corrupting about what you just talked about.
Corrupting is a powerful word, Mr. Hager.
But you know, I don't see the people, the American people, no matter what color they are, no matter how biased they are or how racist they are, they would not support a circumstance where kids are constantly abused and raped and made hunger and kept without health care and stuff like that. We just won't support that. No man or woman, well, let me say most people would not support that. And to see this narrative developing at the board over something that's not germane to the real issues, and that's people moving across that border without jurisdiction. I mean, without the proper process, going through the proper process. That is what we're talking about.
Well, I think the real issue is, all right, it's the color of one's skin, okay? I've heard you say the paradigm shift so many times, Mr. Hatter, all right? White folks are afraid of that paradigm shift where the majority will be people of color.
Some white folks.
Okay.
It's not all of them.
And I think this is part of the reason that you're seeing all of this stuff directed at those people from the border. All right. I haven't been to the border, but I know people that have been down there, and and they tell me it's totally different than what you see on TV. All right, or social media, other social media stations, etc., etc., etc. Okay, and Trump is trying to fulfill his campaign issue. All right, and that's his only. He thinks he's going to get reelected in 2020. I don't think so.
Without a doubt.
I don't think so. I think hopefully he'll be in prison. All right.
Well, I think that's
and then goes for Kushner and Trump's kids, and I mean, what do you think the other countries are thinking about? When they see Trump up there with his foolishness. All right.
You got to nail it down.
Our respect is gone. All right. Look how he disrespected Canada, Germany. All right. France. All right. Called Africa shithole country. All right. He doesn't know that Puerto Rico is a part of the United States. All right. They're still without electricity over there. Now, come on. And the things that he says about women. Okay.
These are all emotional issues. Let's get
these are facts that he has. These are facts that he has said.
Yeah, but they're emotional. That drive emotion.
They can be all of that too. But that pushes the narrative about about this person. Okay, This is not 1950s, 1960s. Okay. He's talking about, he's talking about a beloved hero, McLean. Now,
McLean was a Republican.
it doesn't. Well, but yeah, he's
You
a
said I
Republican.
love it. Oh, I love that.
But the fact
You
is,
called him a Republican.
but the
a hero.
fact is, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He talked about the man in a negative way.
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do things like that. That's not presidential whatsoever. Okay. And the last show we did, I think, they said, and it's been established, he had told over 10,000 lies. That was a month ago, so it's probably up to 20,000 today. All right, that's the lion. That's the lion. That's the lioness man in the world. That's not presidential. You got to have somebody. You got to have somebody up there that you can look. You can look up to. All right.
The one thing I'll just say, Mr. Hatter, is this, and that I think a lot of times in this country we pay too much attention to party and things of this nature. Only thing I can say about that from a historical point of view, a lot of times people will say that we need somebody with a businessman's mentality to run the White House. Now, every businessman that has gone into the White House, regardless of what party that they belong to, has failed drastically. And they failed because they try to run the government in the same manner in which they try to run a business. And they find out that you can't run the government in the same way that you run a business.
I'll concede that.
And that is the major problem that many businessmen who try to dabble into politics have, is that they believe that they can take their business acumen and put it toward the government, and it just doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work that way.
And it's unfortunate, because I think a lot of times people have good ideas, but those ideas get lost in the process by which they try to get implemented. And what I would hope in this country, as I'm going to be 52 years old at the end of May, that people would do and look at folks that do something as opposed to say something. My mother used to tell me, God rest her soul, that talk is cheap.
Yes.
All right. But actions speak much louder than words. And I look towards what people do more than what they say. I can look at everything that the president has said now and not agree with anything that he says, okay? But then I look at his actions, and his actions to me are more deplorable than his words. So I look to what somebody does as opposed to what somebody says. If you want to love somebody, you open up your arms to embrace that person. If you want to punch somebody in the mouth and hit them, then that's not showing them that you love them. And that's the whole point, I think, that our country takes, is the stance of what our leader propagates to us. Under President Obama, we didn't have a posture of anger and hostility towards the world. We were more of an open type society. President Trump, on the other hand, wants to, I agree with having a strong America, but I don't agree that you want to shut everybody off in the world and put your fist up and say, I'm going to fight all you son of a guns because I got to make sure I take care of my house first. And it just seems to be a little childish from the point of view of, we all have the world's finite set of resources. But if we don't act as a cooperative or act that we care about one another, then these resources are not going to be allocated in the way that we wanted to be allocated. They're going to be allocated to those who helped in the cooperation, and those that have not helped in the cooperation are going to be left out. A lot of times people think, in this country in particular, that the almighty dollar dictates what's going to happen. And I think it is shown time and time again that the dollar is not the end all to what makes something either work or make something not work. And my point to emphasize that is education. You can spend gazillions of dollars in a system that is broken, and people will not get educated, and those folks will have had the most blown amount of money spent on them. And you can have people that don't get a dime spent on them have quite a bit of knowledge and be able to get an education and go on to college, but they came from a poor, a broken, and inept system from an objective point of view, but nonetheless, they were able to learn. And money in this country cannot be equated with success. And that's what we have to do as an individual, is take back what we deem as being successful and not gear it to be with money. Because money can be the root of all evil, and it also can be the root of good. It just depends on what that money is utilized for. One of the things we were talking about, the borders and this and that. Other administrations in the past have used money to these countries to help them in their systems to try to keep these individuals from leaving those countries to invade or flood the border, so to speak. But this president doesn't see to try to kill them with kindness or a soft approach. His approach has got to be harsh or firm or standing tall or appearing to be tough, when in fact everybody knows that when you act tough, you aren't tough. People who are tough don't have to portray that they are. But this is the one thing about this president that really bothers me. I grew up in Flint. You grew up in this area, Mr. Hatter. You know somebody who's tough. They have a look to them. They have a way that they act about them. They don't talk about how tough they are. But when you're not tough, when you talk a lot of toughness, that means you're soft as Charmin. And that's one of the things that I'll say about this president. I'll say it to his face if he was standing right here. I don't even think you've ever been in a fist fight in your life. You haven't tasted your own blood. Because when you've tasted your own blood, you treat people differently. You have a respect for somebody.
But I think that we're too theoretical right here. We got to get back to the practical.
And what's practical?
And all of this stuff about you can't talk tough. What you say has to have some substance.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Head. You reap what you sow.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Now, it's kind of interesting to listen to you talk that way, which is the way that we really should be talking. It's the way the world ought to be. And everybody thinking about their own self-worth in the world would say the same thing.
But see, you and me, Mr. Hatter, when we were raised, these are the values that were taught us as a child.
And you know, I can't depart too much from that. I just have to figure out how to rebut what you just said. And I do have things that I want to say about that. Not that you're wrong, but this is a different time, a different circumstance. We're a world that's exploding in population. Our resources are declining. And you're talking about, we haven't seen the challenges that yet ahead of the next generation of kids. They will have to find ways to support themselves, the ways to defend themselves. Because when we are without resources, we turn on each other. We eat our young.
There's no question about it. And that goes to, I think, what your president is trying to do with respect to the coal industry.
Well, you know, we want...
Because that resource, that's beating a dead horse.
But Glenn, look at this. If we don't find a way to stabilize our country with our multiculturalism, or our pluralism, which threatens us anyway, because people look like each other are going to box themselves into a corner, and they're going to defend the resources and take everything else that they can. That's Darwin.
Yeah, but let me ask you this, Mr. Hatter.
I guess I can't make a point. Go ahead.
No, but let me ask you this. We have 50 wonderful states here.
Yes.
And our populations tend to flow more towards the urban areas for
Yes.
more or less of the
Yes.
reasons.
Mhm.
But we have a lot of land. We have a lot of fallow land. We have a lot of land. I've visited the beautiful states of North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Utah, things of that nature. That's beautiful country. But a lot of people are trying to move their families to those areas. And there's a reason why they're not moving their families to those areas. And that's because they can't make a living in those areas. So again, I agree with what you're saying with respect to we all want to have an orderly system. We all want to be able to say that our borders are secure, that people pass through the borders with proper paperwork, that goods pass through the borders with proper paperwork. But you just wanted to tell me that we got to get real. So
Yeah.
we're getting real in that we know that people want to cross that don't have paper. We know that people are going to send goods without the right paperwork. But what systems do we create to combat that?
We're working on those systems right now. We should be having people on this show to talk about how do we stabilize our country right now by 2050, when white Americans will no longer be the arithmetic and political.
You mean they'll be in the minority?
Pardon?
You mean they'll be in the minority?
Yes, they will be.
Okay.
We're approaching that right now.
Yeah, it'll be a 2030 for sure.
Yeah. So we have to figure out if we're going to remain a stable, secure, democratic nation, we got to begin talking about these problems now, not simply fighting each other or arguing over trivial
I agree.
or criticizing another side because they're thinking about these things. Because the people who framed this country, the Constitution, they thought about this stuff. They thought about all of that.
Thought about a lot
Yeah,
of
they
things.
thought about it in the right way.
Yeah, and I
The right
agree.
people now
And
know
they-
this.
yeah.
In those days, they were people that had the same color, the same education, the same religion, and the same degrees of money. They were privileged, okay, in those days. Now, today we're different. We're multifaceted in color, and we're growing division by the day. First it was only black, whites, and Chinese people, and we categorize ourselves that way. But look at all of the ways that we've dissected people in this country and gave them unique designations that further subdivide us.
Oh, there's no question.
We need to begin thinking about how we save this country from ourselves and from others.
Well, again, I think we've hit it on the nail on the head as far as I think what the key
And I think
to
that
is.
Mr. Trump's philosophy singles that out.
Well, I disagree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah, I would, and that's okay.
But again, we can
But
agree
we
to
started
disagree. That's
we
right.
started a dialogue, and people are listening to us. They're saying, well, what should I be doing to make sure that we have a free and democratic society by the year 2030? That's what people ought to. We ought to have a white person over there. We ought to have a Mexican here. We ought to have somebody else here, and talk about these problems. How we save this country, and look at how we're divided. You got a person elected to office that calls the president an MF. We can't have that, guys.
Well, with that, my last word is, Mr. Hatter, if you want all that to change, we got to vote Democratic. With that, we must bring the In My Opinion show to a close. Until next time, stay focused.